Loving God, we thank you for the ministry that we share together in the Southern Ohio Mission Territory. We thank you for giving us experts who can help us navigate the waters of budgeting and how mission and vision are so important as we move through being church together. Help us to be strong, help us to stay well, help us to know that what our mission is all about is the good news of Jesus Christ. Be with us, bless us, and keep us in your care. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Bishop. And now we'll let Pete take it away.
I'm seeing a lot of names, but no pictures. Is that normal?
It is fairly normal, particularly if you're, see, Susan showed us who she is there, particularly if you're dealing with unstable internet connection, sometimes turning off your, hi Sheila, nice to meet you. But I will admit, it's a little disconcerting as the presenter, isn't it? Yeah. Hi, everybody.
I can't tell when they fall asleep.
Yeah. Well, sometimes they don't want you to know that. Yeah.
But there's
Pastor,
a lot of jokes I just can't tell you all. That's just the way it is. As I understand, what we're going to do is you've had the video for a week or two. Yeah, you've all watched it, and this time is just you ask questions and I make up answers. All right, I'll ask the first question.
I'll be the first to say I'm so sorry I was not able to watch the video. I was invited on Tuesday to join this meeting. I'm with Christ the King.
Okay.
And I work full time, and we had a council meeting this morning at 9. So I didn't do it.
Here you
I
are.
don't think we got the link. I'm not sure that we got the link either. We didn't get the, I got the registration, but I don't believe any of us at Christ the King, because we didn't come in until Tuesday. We didn't get the link or the video. Pastor shared it with us.
How many others did not watch? So I can go back and in my own mind. All right. We'll do it this way.
The easy way or the hard way? It sounds like we're doing it the hard way. Sorry, Pastor.
The video, and I'm doing this from memory at this point, began by saying that there are two types of budgets, and both are absolutely necessary within the church, and I would say any volunteer organization. So what's said here, if you're on leadership roles in any other kind of volunteer organization, this will apply across the board. And the first type of budget is a line item budget, and you all know what a line item budget is. It's Christian education, Sunday school supplies, vacation Bible school, whatever else, and it is just Sunday school, X number of dollars, supplies, X number of dollars, vacation Bible school, X number of dollars, and then you come to bottom line and you are going to spend X number of dollars and somehow Christian education across the board. Now that budget is written for the leaders of the church, and primarily church pastor and church council, the treasurer, and an auditor, because every church should have an audit once a year. Not that I'm accusing treasurers of being dishonest, but there needs to be transparency. And if there's an audit, then nobody can raise an issue. I learned when I was studying stewardship, or I'm still studying stewardship, that if you give to a volunteer organization, you want to see the budget. Treasurers produce the budget. 90% of the people do not read the budget. Treasurers complain. I can't tell you how many times my treasurer complained, I put all this work in and nobody has read it. The psychological fact is, if you have a budget, you're transparent. If you don't have a budget, there's something wrong. It's all psychological. If you do an audit, everything is fine. People won't read the audit statement. But if you don't have it, somebody's going to say, what are you trying to hide? It's irrational. It's dumb. It's life, just across the board. So you have this document that says the average congregation, because I've been doing consulting now for 20, 25 years, the most recent study I did of congregations in the Southern Ohio Synod, average budget goes someplace between $100,000 and $125,000 a year. Now, when I was at Good Shepherd, the budget was $960,000, and it's over $1 million now. But there are very few congregations that have that kind of budget. The treasurer will use the line item budget to raise issues about we're underspending or we're overspending in a particular area. Now, there's a warning here in that we spent about 80% of our Christian education budget, Sunday school, in September. It's when we ordered all the supplies. So for the first 8 months, we were grossly underspent the Christian education budget. If we did it month by month in September, early October, we grossly overspent the budget. So you've got to keep track of in the heart of winter, you're going to spend a lot of money on heating. Then you're going to have underspending in spring when we don't have those big hot or cold days. Then you're going to spend a lot of money on air conditioning. Then you're going to take some time off. So the treasurer keeps track of where we are in our spending as set by a record over the last 5 years. And if there seems to be a problem, then the treasurer waves a flag. So this is really a working document for congregational leaders and the church council, the pastor, treasurer, and then your annual audit. If you are lucky enough to have CPAs in the congregation, we never paid for an annual audit. We had 3 CPAs who were not on the finance committee come in and do the audit for us free. But we had a signed document that these folks said it was done. Now, there's a major problem with line item budgets in that outside of the financial people, they inspire no one. You look at this long list of numbers. In our budget, it could be 2 to 3 pages. Nobody was going to read that except for the financial people. And so what we did was we decided that we would create what is known as a narrative budget. And that's the second type of budget. And the narrative budget is designed to tell a story. In essence, all of stewardship is telling a story. It's telling the story of the congregation. And the audience is not the financial people, but the audience is the average member of the congregation. The narrative budget is trying to reach out and inspire and to say to people, this is how you should, this is what we're going to do so you can support the meeting of the budget with your financial resources. I want to stress, because a number of congregations, and I've done this with some secular groups, immediately the financial people say, no, that's not a budget. No, that's not a budget. Both are extremely important. So when your treasurer hits the roof, say, stop, stop. That's not what we're doing. We're addressing two different audiences in two different ways with the same information. Good so far?
Excellent.
Now, when we talk about budgets, and I want to also say, the narrative budget comes out of the line item budget. So when you're putting together a budget, you're going to put together the line item budget first. And the people who write the line item budget are the finance committee, the church council. In my church, I was responsible for putting together the budget and then taking it to the church council for their debating. And so however you put together the line item budget, that comes first. And then that is passed on to the people who will write the narrative budget. And I think of the primary writers of that budget are storytellers. They are the graphic artists of the congregation. They are the designers of the congregation. They are not the financial people. If you ask the writers of the narrative budget to write a line item budget, they will say no. If you ask the financial people to write the narrative budget, they'll think you're crazy. Good? Yes? So far. Now, what needs to be in the budget, of course, you need to have the expenditures of what you're going to spend in the line item budget, and then in putting together the line item budget, I'm a big fan of creating umbrellas for like kinds of ministries. So in the video, when you watch it, you will have here are the items, but they'll be under an umbrella. So in the video, there are three. I created three umbrellas for every congregation, and I did that because just about every congregation that I've consulted with over the last 20 years or so have these three items. Now, we had 6 umbrellas because of the size of our church, but I would guess 90 to 95%, these 3 items are there, and then you might put a 4th one or 5th one, depending upon your church. And the umbrellas would be faith development. And this is how we build our faith. This is how we support our faith. This is how we grow in our faith across the board. And within that umbrella, I put, as I remember it, worship services, Christian education, educational retreats, Bible study, or whatever else you have in your budget or within your ministry portfolio. And what I want to do by doing that is, too often we build silos between Sunday school and youth ministry or Bible studies. And while each have their own goals and targets, they're not absolute solid silos, that you have a lot of crossover between the two. And by putting it under the umbrella, I can say what happens in worship should be reflected in, and what's said in worship should be reflected in Sunday school and Bible studies, and what happens in Sunday school and Bible studies should be reflected in worship. And there's just this kind of nice flow within that particular area. The second umbrella that I had in the video was care of members. And how do we care for our members? And under there, I put social groups, senior citizen group, youth ministry, youth Luther League, or whatever you happen to call it, pastoral calling, hospital calling, weddings, funerals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third umbrella is outreach. It is my belief that if there is not outreach into the community, the church is nothing more than a private club with a religious bent across the board. So we have to hold up. Now, what we did at Good Shepherd was, when I came there, the outreach budget was about 3 or 4% of the congregation. What we did, or what I did, was I moved it to the top of the budget, because there's a communication theory that states or maintains what you hear first is what you will remember over what is said second. So if you say it's not black, it's white, you're going to remember black more than you're going to remember white. So that statement, it is white, not black, if you want them to remember the color. And to raise the importance of outreach, then the budget started with the outreach budget and then moved on to, we didn't use these terms back then because the terms have changed over my 50 years of ordained ministry. We moved to worship and that kind of thing. So I think the order is important, although I did not say that in the video type of thing. All salaries and building expenses needs to be in either under one of those umbrellas. So in the normal writing of a budget, a line item budget in a congregation, the smallest ministry area is outreach. And normally in most congregations, 80 to 90% of the entire budget is written for salaries and building expenses, and about 10% is written out for outreach. The churches, in my reading of studies about what people think about the church, one of the biggest complaints is that the church spends $1 out of $5 or 20% on ministry, and 80% of its budget is spent on themselves. So why should I give to you? My wife and I have always been tithers plus. We made an agreement before we got married as part of the premarital counseling that when we got married, we would always tithe before taxes. Now, in our 54 years of marriage, we missed 1 year in doing that. I was a senior in seminary, she was a senior in college, and I was making $50 a week, and we could squeeze $4 out of that $50 for church offerings. But we paid for college educations and weddings and everything else, and maintained a minimum of a tithe. So why should we make that kind of expense if church is going to spend 80% of its money on maintaining the building? Not very inspiring. So one of the rules that we had was that we were going to, in putting the budget, put in time and salary in the under the umbrellas or under a particular ministry. I can't remember precisely the figures in the budget that's going to be, if you go back and look at the video. So I'm going to make some up and just give me some latitude on this. On the normal budget, worship will receive something like $2,700 for music and whatever else. But when I put the salary of the pastor and the organist and the choir and the people who are involved in worship, I'm not spending $2,700 on worship. I'm spending $27,000 on worship. Now, what kind of church would you want to go to? One where worship got $2,700 or where it got $27,000? Because you're paying salary. It's very legitimate. And some of this is really guess. You can spend, I spent 4 days putting together that budget because I took all of my consulting in the Southern Ohio Synod and said, in the Southern Ohio Synod, about 60% of the budget is going to be in building and in salaries. About 30% is going to be in the care of members, and about 10% is going to be for outreach. Now I want to say I think outreach should be higher than 10%, but the last time I did this about 3 years ago, the overwhelming number of Southern Ohio Synod congregations gave about 4.8% of their budget to mission support to the Synod, and about 5.2% of its budget to local food banks, Habitat for Humanity, whatever else you want to come up with. And then I just put in all kinds of figures there saying, and what happened if I did that, because I took 120,000 as the average budget for the 90% of the congregations in the Southern Ohio Synod, 81% of the budget was for building and salaries. So I would list 2,700 and 1,000 here and whatever that, and then the bottom line was 81,000 for building and salaries. And I look at that and said, sure, we spent $4 out of $5 on ourselves. But when I included it into the 3 umbrella areas, we spent it all on ministry. And I think this becomes a very important way to communicate what the church does. Are we good so far? Am I losing you guys?
No,
All right.
great, thank you.
Then let's talk about we all know how to do a line item budget, so let's talk about how do you do a narrative budget. And the way we do a narrative budget is, again, we get the graphic designers, we get the artists, we get the storytellers to come in. And we take the line item budget, which is the working document, and we say, and they're under umbrellas, how do we do this? And I'm going to suggest there are I want to say 3 ways, but I have to remember what. And the first is in the annual report. Now, it's my impression that 80% of the congregation does not read the annual report. And there are several reasons for this, because annual reports tend to be what we did last year. The high school girls beat their mothers in the annual softball game at the church picnic. Well, everybody knows that the girls beat their mothers in the softball game. We had a Christmas pageant. Good. I sent this video to my daughter, whose church was really struggling, and she shared it with the church council, and they said, no wonder nobody reads our annual budget, our annual report, because it's just bullet points. We did, duh. Of course we did. And by the way, we've done the same thing for the last 10 years. So when we put together our annual report, and then part of this was transferred over to the stewardship committee, each umbrella had the annual report of what we did, and 25% of the report was what we did last year, our successes. And over 50%, and I would fight with my staff on these figures, so they're not all going to, had to be, what are we going to do next year? So on the top of the page, we would have worship. This is what we did last year. And this year, we really want to do this for Reformation Sunday. And what we really want to do, which is slightly different on Easter Sunday, is, and that's why we raised the budget $1,000 or $2,000 in worship. With the youth ministry, our kids are really booked into all of the new technologies and the social media and everything else. So what we want to do is to engage our kids more through the communication process that they are using every day, so that they will actually listen to us. Now, when my daughter took one of my annual reports this year, the report back was, we wanted to read the report because it was what's going to happen rather than what has happened. And the annual report can say, we are going to tweak. We don't have to create a whole new role of, but we're going to tweak. We felt the Sunday school was really good, but this year we're going to add this, or we're going to emphasize, or whatever else. And then underneath this report was the line item budget. So you could read on the top of the page what we were going to do. Then you could see the figures. And in order to make this happen, these are the resources that we're going to need. Another way to do this is, and to that process, as we got more and more sophisticated. Now, remember, I retired in 2002, so we didn't have the technology today with cameras and taking pictures and other stuff. But as much as we could with the technology we had, we would add pictures at the top of the report and where the line item budget is. So you'd have a report on the top with pictures. Then you'd have the line item budget underneath. You might have the line item budget on the left-hand side and pictures on the right. If you like it the other way, put the pictures on the right. I don't care which way you do it. We began this process by when we couldn't, when we were first experimenting with it, by just doing a line item budget and then dividing the paper, the pages, a third, 2/3, or a half. And we'd have the line item budget on the left side, and then we'd have annotated notes on the right. So we get to the youth budget and we say, in the youth budget, Katie's salary went up by $500. You know, you could see that in the budget. We would put in the annotated budget. Katie has increased the attendance at our youth meetings by 5 people on average, and we think this really needs to be rewarded, so we raised her salary. Now we're patting Katie on the shoulders and we're explaining why, and that helps to build some enthusiasm about what's happening within the. Now, you don't do that for every line item, but you pick out 1 or 2 in each and you just put footnotes, a sentence, 2 sentences. I would not put any more than 3 simple sentences, because the purpose is just to call attention and to explain why you are doing what you are doing. Because if you don't explain it, nobody in the congregation is going to know why you're doing what you're doing. And I personally get a little annoyed when I'm asked to do something, but I don't have a reason to do it. I'll do almost anything the Synod asks if they give me a reason. If they don't give me a reason, I pick on them. I always say yes, but I pick on them a little bit in the process. The second way that you create a narrative budget is to make brochures. Now, if you do this in the annual report, and I believe every congregation has to have an annual report, and it really needs to be in terms of a narrative report. In brochures are always very few words, lots of pictures, and multicolor. So if you do a trifold, and we're going to do 3 umbrellas, you have one of the trifold with the umbrella of faith formation, another umbrella for the care of members, another umbrella for outreach. You've got some pictures of your kids, which you took, or people you took with your smartphone. You don't need to go out and get a whole bunch of special equipment, and you paste it in and you say, this is where, and again, I put 60% into faith formation, and this is the people it's touching. I particularly like pie charts, so you get a pie chart, and it's amazing if you go back and look at the video how much faith formation jumps out when it's on a pie chart, especially when you attach building. Oh, so that's why we're doing worship and Sunday school and Bible study. Look at that. Look at this is where we're spending our bucks. Now, I'm much more of a line item budget guy, but I always would find people who would help me design the brochure. Remember, they're 2 different audiences, and therefore 2 different types of work. Now, the third way that you can do this narrative budget is YouTube. if you go watch what was sent to you, it's a YouTube, and you can do this fairly easily. When we had the technology guy back in November, October, whenever we had that, he said he did all of his stuff off of his phone, basically, put together YouTubes. And by the way, go ask your kids how to do it in the church or youth group, and they'll just love being told, and give them a little guidance, but they'll have fun, and you'll create real enthusiasm within the process. There's a communication theory, which I buy 100%, is 1/3 of Americans, and I assume that they did this with adult Americans. 1/3 of Americans' primary way of absorbing data or internalizing data is through the spoken word. 1/3 of Americans process data visually. And 1/3 of Americans process data through action. Now, if you create a 5-minute, no more than 10-minute, probably 8 or 7 minutes would be good, YouTube video, you get spoken word, you get visual, and you get action. So now you have the potential of speaking to 100% of the congregation and how they process information. So you say, we are coming to you with the congregation story and what we need to do to continue it. And you get somebody under the umbrella of faith formation, and they talk, and then you can show 10 seconds or 20 seconds of a worship service, and 10 seconds or 20 seconds of a Bible study or whatever else. And this is why we have in here $90,000. And then you go to care of members, and you can take a short video of pastor visiting in the hospital, or a short video of the fellowship groups, or a short video of whatever else. In a video, you can have 4 people answering the question, why I need my faith, why I need my church. And the reason I'm supporting this budget is when my spouse was really sick, I can't tell you how much this congregation did for me in delivering meals. It was hard keeping my wife in bed when she was sick, because somebody was going to come and clean up a little bit, and she didn't want them to know she had a dirty house, so she had to get up and clean before somebody came to help clean. You know, but you can play with this, and you can then bring in all of the elements of good communication process. So I think to conclude, recognize there are 2 types of budget, but where I think congregations need to really work, and it can take 3, 4, 5 months to put together a narrative budget, because if you start now beginning to take a few pictures and begin to think about how do we say this, you can have a pretty decent presentation by the time you get around to when you have your stewardship campaign and the other stuff. I should have added that brochures are really good, because you can do it on a screen like this. You can mail them to every member in the congregation in a letter. You can put them in a track rack so visitors can come and see, okay, this is how you spend your budget. Because when we looked at a church, we wanted a church that had these kinds of images across the board. My mind is racing backwards. A third thing that a budget does is that it's a reality check. And I think that's especially true with line item, but it can be with narrative. If you tell me that your youth ministry is really important and you have $50 in your budget for youth ministry, I don't believe youth ministry is important. Now, part of that can be helped with X number of dollars for rooms, but you got to put salary and other stuff, because nobody's going to believe this is important with $50 in the budget. Katie, what did I leave out? Katie?
I'm here.
What did I leave out?
Well, I just a little more on, I don't think you left this out, but a little more on this reality check is that your budget reveals your priorities and your mission and your focus. And you've said it in a variety of ways, that a line item budget, but also in a sense, your narrative budget. Both of these reveal what's important to the congregation. And so they should be rooted in your purpose and values and your understanding of your mission in the community. And so a narrative budget, for instance, is answering the question, what difference are we making? What is the change we are trying to be? What is the good news that we're trying to share, and who are we trying to share it with? And so that's where the inspiration comes.
I'll piggyback on that. There's probably 3 or 4 minutes on the importance that budget comes out of the purpose, and your budget has to reflect your purpose. If you don't have a purpose or a strong purpose, everything you do is arbitrary. It may be very good, but there's no consistency. So you begin with purpose, which leads to line item budget, which leads to narrative budget. Would be the formula. And that's in the video if you go back and watch the video.
Yes, and so that's part of the reality check too. There are always, in every congregation, there's usually at least one pet project, which is sometimes become, in some places, a sacred cow, which the congregation just does because it always has done it. And a purpose, running everything through the filter of your purpose. And the budget is a part of that. Running the budget through your purpose kind of tends to filter out and lift up some of those. And sometimes you may have to have some hard conversations about a pet project, a pet ministry, which is no longer, for one reason or another, helping your purpose or fulfilling your purpose or in alignment with your purpose. So sometimes you may have some difficult conversations coming up. So this is a process, and all of these things are linked. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to lift up from what you said earlier, because I got very excited, and it was about this. When I first started in this call, I ran into so many congregations that were like the congregations I had served, who felt like year after year, they got to the end of another year and they felt like they'd been spinning their wheels. They just didn't feel like they'd made any forward progress. And there was something reinforcing, what reinforced that was doing the annual report as a justification of their existence on what they had done the year before. There was absolutely no sense of forward movement in the annual report. And the budget had been designed in this, well, what did we spend last year? Let's try to spend as little as possible. Right? Let's not spend any more than that if we can get away with it. So that also tended to halt forward movement. And so congregations continued to get to the end of the year and think they had made no forward progress and were frustrated and sometimes despairing. And forcing people to answer the question, I love your proportions that you offer. Let's make 50% of the annual report for your ministry area about what you're going to do in the coming year. What forward movement are you going to make in the coming year? That's a goal setting exercise that can be very helpful. Excuse me, just
Let
a
me-
moment. Go ahead.
You stopped. One way to do this. This is not in the video. Uh, um, my staff and I got together once a year, and we were going to talk about what we we're going to do next year. And for the first couple of years we did that, it got to be pretty negative. And so I changed the way we did evaluations. And the question was, what did we do well next year? What did we do well last year? And it was very awkward because for the first 5 minutes, nobody on the staff did anything well. It was just silence. Nobody had ever asked that question. What did we do well? And then about the next 3 or 4 minutes, we got one and one. And then the dam broke and we filled the blackboard up with what we did well. After we got the blackboard filled up with what we do well, the question was asked, what can we do to make what was done well better? Now, what that did was remove any defensiveness. We've already said it was done well. So nobody had to defend what was on the board. And we would spend the rest of the day saying, this is how we can tweak it, which made it possible in the annual report to say, this is what we're going to do. And many times, because you can't recreate the whole system every year, this is how we're going to tweak what we're already doing well. The last thing after doing this for about 6 hours was, were there any things that we really haven't discussed that were negative? And basically, every year was in deciding how we were going to tweak what we did well, took care of all of the negative comments. They were answered in what we were going to do well. And it might be an interesting thing to do with church council on a retreat. What did we do well as a church? What do we want to tweak so what we've already done well? And then that helps you to design your budget, both line item and narrative. And we did that for at least 10 to 12 years when I figured out this is what we had to do to not have negative meetings. And nobody came to the meeting ready to defend themselves because that wasn't the purpose of the meeting. Any other questions?
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
I had 6 years of college. I never heard of a narrative budget before. This is so helpful to me. It's way more positive than any thinking about the line item budget that I've ever done before. Where is the link to your video?
It's on the Synod's website. Is it, Katie?
Yes, it's on the Synod website.
Jeff.
Look for Vibrant Church Conference, and then look for the click on the link directly to. I think it'll be posted to
Pastor.
the general public in the next week or so. But we ought to be able to get it to you sooner than that. What were you going to say?
Matt already did. Pastor Matt
Matt.
already sent it to us. We have.
Oh,
you have it,
okay.
Jeff, in
So
your
you should
email.
have it in your email.
Yeah, we've got it.
I will also say that we have quite a few congregations who are doing this already. It's probably likely to be the larger congregations who are doing that. But you might reach out to the congregations in your area. For instance, does Lord of Life do a narrative budget, Alec?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think we use that lingo, but all of this stuff is familiar with me and stuff.
Yeah. So you could reach out to surrounding congregations and ask them just to send them yours. Ask if they would mind sharing with you what they did this last or just most recently. There's also a link on the ELCA website. If you go to the homepage and you scroll all the way to the bottom and you look for resources, they'll take you to resources, and one of the subdivisions of those resources is stewardship, I think. And in there is a rather old document about narrative budgets, which can help you think through, for instance, how to kind of prorate salary costs across ministry lines and that kind of thing. So it's pretty basic stuff. But really, if you watch the video, you'll get that's more in the nitty gritty how to. But if you see some examples, you'll get a sense of it right away. And then the newer versions of them are just getting so jazzed up. So adding the pictures, reducing text, adding visuals seems to be the trend that we're going to. So getting it as concise as you can.
So that people will actually see it and read it.
Right. Yes. And people
you can get
also
away. Go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say, Pete has a wonderful story that he tells about how he got people to come to church on time. He discovered everybody was kind of straggling in through the first hymn, and so he switched gears. And what he started offering at the beginning of each, in the 10 minutes before each service, roughly, was a slideshow of people in action in the congregation. And he found that they were all there so they could see themselves. People love to look at pictures because they're looking for themselves and people they know. Use that.
And that, I thank you, Katie. I read that and I preached it, but I never could get it done. So I'm 100% behind, but if you go to Good Shepherd, you're not going to see that. So some things senior pastors just cannot do. I will also say, in the back of the video, there is a 5-minute video that I took from the Presbyterians on narrative budgets. And if you just show that to your people, it 5 minutes over 37 minutes or 38 minutes of what I said, but it is a very, very good summary of what a narrative budget does and what you do. I would not be overly afraid of some length in the annual report, but certainly other places, you don't need long paragraphs, but you can get away with it in the annual report because people expect you to talk about what you're going to do with some justification. But you're telling the story, and you always think, what story or what are people taking away from this rather than a number? What we're doing to witness to Jesus. That's the key to it all.
Pastor Pete, one of the things that I was impressed by was that you used the word inspire. What inspires us through the narrative budget? And that's consistent with what we came up with at Christ the King in our collaborative work, as well as in my research. So inspire is a great test.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I would say very few people are inspired by a budget. Very few people are inspired by the need to keep the lights on. Very few people are inspired by salaries. So if you keep your focus there, you just have people just kind of go, and it does sound like keeping our world as, the world we have, our little country club, as comfortable as possible, which is not the purpose of church, right? And so there are at least some people do care about the building, right? But they can be appealed to for special projects or that kind of thing. But the vast majority, especially young people, they want to hear how their participation in and support of the ministry in your congregation is making a difference and sharing the good news about Jesus. And that's what you want to emphasize. And that can be in general terms, but it really hits home when you have stories to tell, impact stories. So look for the impact stories. How did this help one or two specific people? What kind of impact is it having? And so if you're trying to raise money for kids to go to youth gathering, ask some kids who went to the youth gathering the last time what a difference that made, and have them share that story as part of inspiring people to support that effort.
Let me another way to do narrative budgeting without doing narrative budgeting. If you send out quarterly giving statements, never send it out without a thank you letter in it saying, because of you, this is what happened. So we had, I was asked to go to Epiphany in Centerville, and on the first quarter of giving, we were sending out the statements, and I insisted, because I became the interim senior pastor, that we have a thank you note. And so on the very top of the on the note, it says, "This is not a bill, it's a thank you." I can't tell you how many people have said to me, the church has never thanked me for giving. This was a shock. And then it said, a very beloved member who was a staff member at one time died. And I said, I watched the thank you. I watched and experienced Kay's funeral, and I want to tell you, thank you for providing the sanctuary where we could have it. Thank you for the kitchen where we could feed the family and friends. Thank you for the custodians that made sure the flowers got into place. Because of what you have given, we could have Kay's funeral. And I did that with every quarterly statement. It could not go out without a thank you. Now, that gets to be, in a sense, building the narrative budget or continually keeping it in front of people. Everything you do around finances is telling the story in one way or another. And that will help your stewardship campaign a whole bunch. In fact, this is a part of the stewardship. So begin, and I would hunt, and we did one on kids going to a youth thing, and that they engaged in prayer, they engaged in Bible study, they engaged in, and this is the impact it had on our students. And we did one on we took our kids to down to do hurricane relief, and because you provided the funds, these kids went, they hung drywall, they sat with the person whose house was there, they prayed with that person, they all came back differently. That's why we have this kind of, but that is a constant year-round process that you do that in very, very positive ways. Anybody else?
You know, when you talk about inspiring, and it made me think of when we have done vision campaigns or capital campaigns, or even like you say, the youth group campaign, it's funny. We get back more than we need. You know, it
Yep.
comes in twofold sometimes.
Yep.
We put up a sign, you know, we put a parking lot of all things, but boy, did people latch onto that because they could see a vision. So I think, you know, if we could figure out how to do stewardship in a visionary way, like we do the capital campaigns, boy, we might have it licked. But I think you hit it though. It's not about what we did. It is about what we're going to do. And
Yep.
that picture.
There's been a lot of studies that say people join a church where they have an extremely clear purpose. You look at the purpose, and they have a very clear vision about what they're going to do. And in today's world, church shopping is, I want to know what your purpose is, and do you have a clear vision? And that gets to be an evangelism issue.
Yes.
but it's also a financial issue. But so when I do consulting, the first question I always ask is, what's your purpose? And if you have to go look it up, you don't have one.
You don't have one. Yeah. I was going to say the same thing, is that that focusing on positives, focusing on ministry, focusing on mission, focusing on the way in which your congregation is making a difference through all of it has such positive effects across the board, and not just financially. But it is also, as Pete said, it's not just a one and done thing. It's not just a once a year thing any more than stewardship is really just a once a year thing. Now, we talk about stewardship as a holistic process, a real change in culture to focus on the abundance which God is pouring into and through our congregations. Hear that word, through. Sometimes the abundance God pours into us is intended to go through us to other places, and to, but it's all holistic, and it has strong evangelism implications. It also has implications for the sustaining of the saints and faith development. That is, that people, the saints are inspired and their faith is strengthened when they hear how Jesus is at work in the lives of those that they meet with on a Sunday morning. So sharing of those stories together in the group, but also how it's Jesus is at work through the congregation is very inspiring and sustains the saints in their faith. So it has tremendous implications, and congregation members will not invite people to their church if they do not have confidence that their church will provide the kind of support, faith development, and transformation that people are looking for when they're looking for a church. So it's about building that kind of confidence too. Other questions or comments?
You reminded me of the mission trip that I was part of when my children were very small. I helped to take some teenagers from our congregation to West Virginia for a week, the hottest week of the hottest month of the hottest year. We all we did that week was try to survive and drink as much water as we possibly could. But we also did some ministry that was so meaningful. And by the time I got back, I felt like if any one of those teenagers, if my kids grew up to be like any one of those teenagers, I would be such a proud parent. Yeah. And like when you mentioned life-changing experiences, that's what I thought of.
Yes.
And I think we do a lot of life-changing experiences. We just don't tell anybody.
Yes.
We do. I get very angry when, the church is really criticized. Under St. Basil in the 300s, the church started the first hospital in human history. Throughout the Middle Ages, the church was the food pantry, the orphanage, the caring of the poor. It has kept education alive. We never say that. We apologize. I think the church is saint and sinner at the same time. We love to be the sinner, and we never talk about being the saint. And I think the church has to learn to hear and tell its members, Jesus does say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant."
Yep.
And that's got to be a strong message, is that, yeah, we are sinners. But when I look at the thing, I saw a poll about millennials who are not going to church, don't care very little about the church, but when asked, does the church make a difference, 78% said the church makes our neighborhood better. Even though we don't go, even though we don't, how do we tell our story? And we need to learn how to tell our story in the process. And I think that's one of the places the church falls apart, is afraid to tell its story. And so
we're so quick to talk about how confess our guilt.
Yeah,
because we fall short.
Yeah.
But when you have those meetings that you described and say, what did we do well yet last year? Everybody was dumbfounded.
it was. They couldn't answer it until they started to think in those terms.
Yeah, it's a choice. You have to
Yeah.
make that choice.
Yep.
And that's a culture change.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it takes time. It really takes time. Pete, how long does it take to change a culture?
If you really want to make a change in culture, it will take anywhere from, well, up to 10 years.
Yeah, it takes a long time.
And people keep waiting and waiting. In about 5 years, somebody will challenge the change. Now, some changes can happen in 2 weeks, but for significant change, it can take, I used to say 7 years for some of the studies back in the 70s and the 80s, but the latest one I've seen was up to 10 years. So you just keep pounding away and pounding away and pounding away, saying the same thing over and over and over again. And when you say, I've said it too many times, that's when you have to start saying it again.
Yes. And when you finally hear someone parrot it back to you, now, Pastor, you know, da 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 da, then you know you have finally started. You're starting to see the culture change. Yeah, it takes a long time. So a lot of our churches can't afford to wait very much longer to start. So go ahead and start. It's okay. Just figure out what it is you want to change and start working on that.
Anybody else?
We are at a point where we should take a break unless we think we're almost done. And I don't know which direction we're going here.
I would think it's a good place to wrap up. It's been very helpful for me.
Okay, any last questions?
Yeah, my email address is P. Rudowski, P-R-U-D-O-W-S-K-I at fuse.net. You are more than welcome to email me at any time. I see my house as a wonderful prison because I can't go out and whatever else. So I really like to hear voices. My telephone number is 513-791-8920. If you want private conversation or you want to ask a question, I'm here almost 24/7. We do go to the grocery store. I do go to Home Depot. I mean, those are the two essentials in life. But whatever I can do to help, let me know. And I will not send you a bill.
Pastor Rudowski, I'm sure you know Pastor Redder, right? I had the opportunity to talk to him a couple of weeks ago. We were calling our congregation, and he shared with me he was failing retirement, but it was a wonderful thing to fail. So thank you for all your continued work. I thanked him, you know, if you have to fail something, fail retirement and keep helping us out. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we will be sending you the recording of this as well as a recording of the chat in case any of that is helpful. And I have put Pete's email and phone number in the chat, so it'll be there in case you lose it anywhere else. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Pastor Rudowski, for keeping us, helping us reorient our thinking on this important work.
Katie, let you and I talk when everybody else clicks off.
Okay.
Bye, y'all.
Have a good day, guys.
Thank you.